Greetings from the Castle Desk. Welcome back, everybody, to the America Spring Championship, day number 2. My name is Frodan, and I'm joined by TJ Sanders. Together, we're going to bring you guys the second semifinal to determine who is going to play Sidonia in the grand finals and get one step closer to become the champion and earn a ticket to BlizzCon later this year. TJ, that last series, we were watching on the side. It was a little bit difficult to watch the conclusion of it because I think that was not exactly how Napoleon or even Sidonia wanted to win that way. They wanted to be really cool. You wouldn't want to see that kind of thing, but this series, I think, is going to be really good, too. I think a lot of these guys have had opportunities to calm down and really collect themselves, and I think these two guys are very composed.
Yeah, Napoleon might have suffered a little bit from nerves, but these two guys seem really relaxed, even just looking at them right before they went up there. Joster, he said in his interview, he's happy with how far he's gotten. He's just hoping that he's going to get a little further. But Rosty, since the very beginning of the tournament, he's had his sights set on the grand final, so he's focused.
Yeah, it's so interesting how different perspectives end up coming to the same result. Joster is just happy to be here. Rosty's going for gold, you know, and even though they have two completely different philosophies in terms of how they handle their mindset, they're both here in the semifinals, and only one of them will go through. Let's see if how these guys feel about the matchups ends up panning out. Joster says he doesn't feel favored at all against Rosty, and Rosty echoes that sentiment. He's like, yeah, I should be the one who has the edge. But it's not always that convenient, especially when you have weird stuff like this Reno Warlock, but also this hybrid Hunter, which we haven't really seen in a lot of months, TJ.
Yeah, it's been a long time, man. You know, I sort of echo Joster's sentiment that he really doesn't have a favorable matchups across most of the decks in his lineup. I mean, this one especially, you know, on paper, it would seem like the Hunter would put on more pressure than the Reno Warlock can deal with, right? Maybe not with a hand like Rosty has right now. Caldwell's a great card, but that's the very, very top end of this deck, and the deck just doesn't have consistent ways of making it through the mid game well if they don't curve out well early game. So he's going to have to make this tracking find something good. I guess Argent Horse Rider is something to put on the board, but Joster actually has a decent hand to deal with things that Hunter usually does in the early game.
Right, so what Rosty has done with his deck list is he's cut some of those slower mid-game minions, like the Savannah Highmane, which sounds like sacrilege to many Hunter players who offer their souls to Rexar on a nightly basis in order to obtain more face. But instead, you put more aggressive cards like Abusive Sergeant, Argent Squires, Argent Horse Riders, and you still keep Call of the Wilds because it's sort of a top-end late game, because that card's just too nuts to cut. Yeah, too nutty to cut. So I think you still be able to put a lot of pressure on, and Rosty is trying to be really aggressive. However, it's really weird because historically there was this weird breaking point where against control Warlocks, all of a sudden, if they have Reno Jackson and you played very aggressively, you actually kind of struggled a lot at that point. Yeah. And I still think that dichotomy still exists. You're favored, up until the fact that they play Reno Jackson. It's like, well, I guess you just lose from this point. And Joss is going to be fishing really hard for that 6-mana legendary minion that can bring him back in the game.
Yeah, we saw it sort of happen yesterday, sort of the same type of situation against the Dragon Warrior deck that he faced up against PNC. And actually, Joster had a similar situation of himself playing against a Reno Warlock in the preliminaries, where he lost a game because his opponent had Reno Jackson on a turn where he otherwise would have been aggressive. It was against Sidonia, actually. Sure. So now Rosty is really going to be looking for just things to get through that mid game. And he has put on a lot of pressure so far. 17 health on turn 4 is a good amount, but he needs to get something to fill up that mid-game curve.
Now, this is one of the arguments against Rosty's deck. He has 2 Call of the Wilds in there for the late-game push, but you don't want it till turn 8 or onwards. I mean, maybe turn 7 because you have the coin. Instead, that's why you want to play aggressive threats that curve out guaranteed. That's why people love playing aggressive decks against really defensive ones, too, because you saw that he was just 1 damage off from killing the Doomsayer with the Argent Horse Rider. So now, all of a sudden, the initiative has been given to Joster. So this Farseer is not just restoring 3 health through his Battle Cry, but it can trade into another minion preserving, or in this case, absorb the Eaglehorn Bow, gaining him more health than that. And every single turn that he can buy is critical for Joster to flip this game around, if he can.
And Rosty might want to take a different approach. You know, with a poor curve, he doesn't want to expend too many resources to try and be aggressive. He probably will want to make sure that he plays a more value-oriented game and realize that Reno Jackson is a definite possibility, considering I won't have a lethal opportunity on my opponent until maybe turn 8 or turn 9. So maybe seeing a little bit more of a board-centric approach, and I think that's going to work out for him more in the long run with how his early hand was dealt.
Yeah, interestingly enough, too, because he cut Savannah Highmane, I think it does hurt matchups like this because you don't have that board presence for post Reno Jackson in case it does happen. Now, Joster, of course, choosing to go for a man-efficient play, removing that weapon. And again, you know, just you don't necessarily want to life tap and reduce it and make it easier for Hunter to kill you, especially if you know Rosty's playing very aggressive. I mean, he even has cards like Direwolf Alpha, which is something you have to be very careful with if he has 2 minions on the board.
Yeah, very true. And just synergized early, it's a deck that really just wants to curve out, and that's Hunter in general, but this deck more so because it doesn't have, like you said, high mains. It does have Tigers, but those are not nearly as good as sort of re-ramping your pressure once Reno Jackson has been played.
I like that Rosty is also utilizing his hero power already. He's cognizant of the fact that his opponent might have some AoE, but also he realizes that he doesn't exactly have the damage to close the game yet. I mean, he did pick up a quick shot, and cards like Call the Wild can exponentially increase in damage. But he still needs a little bit of help here. Now that Sylvanas has safely come down to the board with Joster just going below the halfway point, I mean, things are starting to turn around, and a deck that we underestimate in Reno Warlock might actually be starting off with a win against a class that it's historically struggled against.
Yeah, the mood around here has sort of been somber towards Reno Warlock in general. All of the other players besides Joster think that Reno Warlock is a poor choice of a deck, and Joster just kind of sits there and like smiles a little bit to himself. He's like, well, I won with it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a funny thing that has happened. And I think people also forget that Tice won the Europe Championship with Reno Lock in his deck, and in his post-match interview, he said that it was his favorite deck. He thinks it's the strongest on ladder and in tournament play. So I think we got a sour taste in our mouth from the poor performance at the Asia Pacific Championship.
Well, I mean, he still has to answer this, the Call of the Wild, and that'll probably take up most of his turn here. Joster has Shadow Flame as one of his options here, primarily. I'm trying to see if there's an alternative to not having to give up Sylvanas, because what Sylvanas is good is that it's the more presence that she's on the board, not only can she trade favorably against most things, but you also can take away things like Stranglethorn Tiger by killing your own Sylvanas in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So Joster's even considering like what do I use here? If I Shadow Flame, am I not playing anything else? Do I Twisting Nether because I need to hold on to Shadow Flame because I have a Leroy Jenkins? All these things are like pretty viable to think about.
Yeah, and at the same time, Joster actually might be worried about just dying next turn. He hasn't found Reno Jackson yet. He's been through probably getting close to half of his deck, but still no Reno, and he's at 9 health. It's a very dangerous amount of health. I mean, there's 2 minutes on the board.
Okay. So this is kind of clever here from Joster. He's saving his
That's just game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Kill command off the top.
Oh, man. Well, turns out Reno Warlock struggles still after all.
We may have been calling a little bit early just because the fact that Hunter still had that quick shot and the kill command off the top.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point is that Joster still had to find that heal.
Yeah.
And, Joster tried to go for a little bit of an interesting play here in case he's still Huffer, but in this scenario, he lost a game that I don't know if he was exactly expecting to win.
Yeah, you really need to find the Reno. When it's 1 out of 30 cards in your deck and it's sort of crucial to the matchup, I mean, that's where you sort of find the inconsistencies with Reno Warlock.
You keep that bad boy at the beginning of the mulligans.
You do.
So that wraps up game number 1. Rosty starting off pretty strong here, and Joster's going to have to find that win with the Reno Warlock. Let's take an opportunity to get to know Joster a little bit better before we go into game number 2.
Hi everybody, I'm Joster. I'm from Florida, and I'm here to win the Spring Championship. When I first saw Hearthstone, it was in closed beta, and my brother introduced me to it because I didn't have many games I could play on my pretty terrible laptop at the time. So I checked it out, and I couldn't get myself a key at first, so I just started watching streamers a lot on Twitch. I watched Trump and Crip, and I started to learn the game and knew a lot about the game before I eventually did get a key. And ever since then, I've just been playing pretty consistently. I've just started on the tournament scene. I've been playing open tournaments, and the preliminaries was the first major tournament I've ever actually played in. I'm hoping that by the end of this weekend, I'll have enough prize money to get myself a nicer computer.
So joster coming in with a very upbeat attitude. All he wants is a new PC to play Hearthstone on.
Yeah.
Which is a little overkill in my opinion. I guess maybe it's more for just than just playing Hearthstone. Maybe he just wants to play some Overwatch.
Wants to see those particles in high resolution, Dan.
That's right. So you can see his dank Bastion plays of the game in high definition. Full ultra graphics.
Nice. Or, you know, he could see his rogue deck in high resolution. Epic transition into the game.
Man.
But we're going to jump into the game number 2. Josh is going to throw out the Rogue, and Rosty is going to throw out the Dragon Tempo Warrior.
That's just brutal for Joster. I think one of the best matchups for Dragon Warrior is to punish decks that have slow upkeep. You know, so
yeah,
Rogue is one of those things that take a long time to get set up, and they usually pass turns 1 to 2, maybe even sometimes 3. So Rosty, well, he didn't necessarily have the aggressive turn 1 planes for Finley, but he's got ways to start putting on pressure immediately. And Dragon Warrior excels in this position, especially when you get your opponent to 15 health or below, and you're able to drop that 6-mana minion, the Dragon. I'm actually forgetting the name of the card. Draconoid Crusher. That card is extremely powerful when it comes out as a 9/9.
Yeah, it really is. Other cards that are powerful that make this matchup slightly better than the normal tempo warrior version is Fairy Dragon, which you can see in the hand. Not as good when your opponent has a coin. That's why Rosty decided to go with the Alexstrasza as champion here, because he didn't want coin SI to really punish him and ruin that momentum. Also, Twilight Guardian, just having more consistent stats than Bloodhoof Brave, a lot of times makes it better, because something like 2 3/3s on a board, like an SI7 Agent or Earthquake Farseer, can't trade as favorably into it.
I mean, as a rogue player, you're pretty happy to start on the coin, but not in that fashion where you have to just toss it out as a way to activate the combo enabler for Disarray. So Joster already fighting, excuse me, far behind.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some bowel movements happening too as he realizes he queued up into Dragon Warrior.
Dan said farting.
I apologize. Joster picks up Blood Mage down as his only play. Again, if he had the coin, he'd love to put out that Tomb Pillager, but unable to do so this turn.
Yeah. And just having to put out that Blood Mage Soundhouse to try and get cycle and get to something further. And, you know, this is sort of that issue. But by the time he gets going, and by the time he starts removing the board and applying pressure of his own, like getting minions to stick on the board, he's going to be at a very low life total. And there are a lot of ways that the Dragon Warrior can finish the game. You know, they have lots of charges with both Korkin Elites, Grommash Hellscream, and of course the second Alexstrasza champion. Combine that with weapons and the Draconid Crusher that you mentioned earlier, there is a lot of ways that they can just close out the game very quickly without giving the rogue much time to do things. So being efficient in your early turns is very important in doing so. And so Rosty was about to play the Korkin Elite right away, but decided that maybe doing this is better because he wants to be able to push the extra damage with the Fairy Dragon this turn instead of having to trade it in to the Blood Mage Thalnos.
Yeah, Dragon Warrior, in my opinion, is actually one of the trickier warrior decks to play because there is, and people like to make light of this, but there is validity every single turn to just ignoring what's happening or prioritize hitting your opponent's health. Or going face a lot more than normal because you do get so much stronger as soon as you're able to activate Draconoid Crusher and be able to bound this, put this mounting pressure in. And look at the foundation that Rosty said. He knew on turn 4, if he takes the opportunity to set up the dagger without the coin, he's going to have a lot weaker turns to set up. So if he plays a 4-mana minion, I can leverage my Fairy Dragon, which exists, and I can get that charge damage anyways while still making up with the Ravaging Ghoul. So this is an excellent line that Rosty has taken. And Joster is just kind of struggling here. He's basically looking at potentially 2 turns remaining or less.
Yeah, and you know, that's a very realistic possibility. There's even an option here for Rosty to just play the Azure Drake, Blood to Ichor for 2, and just trade in his 2/2. So he's basically trading off the board, not really expending too many resources because he's replacing his card, but there is merit here for Frothing Berserker and making multiple trades to try and get that big buff happening. So, but this is just looking really grim for Joster. The one thing that he does have going for him is that he has a lot of resources. So if he's able to draw something like Preparation or Backstab and can really get something going, he might be able to maybe find a way back, but it's looking like it's going to be impossible.
Yeah, I mean, he already used his Azure Drake, so Fan of Knives with Preparation would have been amazing on a lot of 2 health minions.
Yeah.
Joster stuck in an awkward spot. He has some available plays, but I don't. Can he even survive the onslaught if his opponent draws a single weapon? It's going to be really close. I mean, he definitely can survive this turn.
Yeah.
Start off with Sap, SI. Has ability to coin out another Sap as well.
This guy's toast.
Yeah, but just sort of not delaying the inevitable, but, you know, delaying a lot of this potential burst damage here. Just got 8 damage on the board, so only needs to find 2. Azure Drake could pick up a Fiery War Axe,
Sure.
Which would give him enough. Also could pick up Alexstras's as champion since he'd have a dragon to activate it.
It's true. Alexstras's champion, by the way, one of those hidden MVPs for the deck.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gives you the ability to just flip that switch from even the get-go. Like, people play Tunnel Trog, and you're like, oh, that's a really threatening card, except they have a 3/3 charger coming at you. And now all of a sudden I control the board, and I have Blood to Ichor, Fiery War Axe to even dictate things further, answer the Totem Golem.
Yeah.
It's a large reason why Dragon Warrior even came to prominence, because you still keep relatively the same powerful matchups as the Temple Warrior, except you do excel against other classes even more, like the Hunter, for example.
Yeah, it's wow, okay. Well, that's just going to be game right
over.
there. Joster's going to concede 2-0 for Rosty already.
Yeah, very quick, very good scenarios here for Rosty to start things off, but we kind of mentioned this going into it, and the players even hinted at it, not so subtly. Joster doesn't know if he can really do the series justice here, because Rosty's got a very good lineup against him.
Yeah, going to be tough for Joster to try and beat these 2 decks now that he's down 2-0, so going to be a tough uphill battle for the young man.
Yeah, but Rosty's playing very solidly, probably praised as the most technical player out of the top 4, and so far proving it multiple times through. Let's get to know him a little bit better as we get ready and set ourselves for game number 3.
If you look at some of the most decorated players in Hearthstone, they all have spreadsheets and countless pages of data. Rossi is exactly in that same boat.
So in Hearthstone, there's 3 main levels of thinking that players can adopt. The first one is the beginner level of thinking. That's your newer players. That's what your basically your average player is going to think at when they make plays. And then there's your advanced player, which means the advanced player, he makes plays that are specifically designed to beat players who are only at beginner level. And then there's expert level, which means when you make your plays, you're trying to beat the advanced player. But you can actually end up losing to the beginner player because you're giving them too much credit and you're playing to beat the advanced player. So the beginner player is going to make plays that you didn't expect and it might end up winning. Okay, so what a lot of players will do when they're trying to justify their play, they'll say, oh, that's just my play style. Well, play styles don't actually exist. There's a play in every situation that'll get you a better result a higher percentage of the time. But we're not computers, so we're not always going to be able to figure that out immediately just because we don't have perfect information. I'm very confident with the lineup I brought this weekend. I feel like I have the best 5 decks out of anybody here. I used to play in a lot of, high-level tournaments, so I actually just don't really get nervous anymore, but I'm sure that's not the case for a lot of my opponents.
Game 2 in the books, and Rosty looking to go up 3-0. Or is it us, TJ? Is it me? Because every series we cast at championships together ends very quickly, most likely in a 4-1. And I'm kind of feeling the momentum is picking up for Rosty in a very similar fashion once again.
Yeah, definitely true. I don't know if it's us, but we talked about it earlier. Rosty, we were talking about it just before the break there. Rosty has Zoo Warlock left and Freeze Mage, and Zoo Warlock seems to be favored against most of the remaining decks from Joster. So if Rosty can pick up a Freeze Mage win in game number 3, it's pretty smooth sailing for him throughout the rest of the series. So this is actually going to be a very important match for Joster. I think he needs to start his comeback right now if he wants to have any hope, because beating Zoo 4 times in a row is going to be really tough.
Yeah, and Freeze Mage can sometimes also beat itself, but that's gotten a lot less. That's happened a lot less just because of how Freeze Mage is able to win in different ways. Before, it used to be heavily dependent on drawing and cycling to the Alex Straza and burning your opponent down. But with things like Forgotten Torch, and even in matches where you have full heals like Senor Jackson, then you're able to just still burn him down anyways.
Yeah.
Blood Mage Thanos gives you a lot of power. Just the fact that Roaring Torch becomes 3 or 2 mana, depending if you have Emperor Thor's hit. It can get to a lot. Now, I do know this matchup is a lot of advanced players, or excuse me, expert level players, just to clarify the difference here. They do like this matchup a lot because there's a lot of ways that you can try to get little edges over your opponent. So, for example, a lot of times you might see them prioritize keeping Novice Engineers and if they have Acolytes, and they're alive on the board, so that we can just get that 1 or 2 damage poke. You might see them prioritize using Hero Power as much as possible over playing for full mana efficiency with the minion card.
Yeah, since Reno Warlocks lost a couple of their key tools like Anti-Heal Bot, they don't have that sort of burst heal that can buy them time before they use the Reno Jackson. So it's going to be a matchup that's more favored towards Mage now. It's more beneficial for them to get early chip damage in because of that fact. And Rosty did forget one level of play in his analysis. Dan, that's the next level.
I like it.
That's what I'm
going to be looking for TJ level plays.
Yeah.
And I think next level stuff can happen before and after, or during the series as well.
Yeah.
Before, of course, is stuff like Ragnaros in your deck. Now, it's not exactly the most mind-blowing thing to put Ragnaros in your Reno Warlock deck, but it is incredibly powerful against Freeze Mage, and that fact hasn't changed at all since the new expansion came out.
Yep.
It's not like Freeze Mage all of a sudden started playing Flamelands to deal with Ragnaros. It takes 2 cards, or sometimes even more, in order to deal with Ragnaros. And say in the instance you can't, you just keep taking more pressure, and all of a sudden, that's the way, you start realizing that's the way you win against Freeze Mage. You don't actually win through Freeze Mage by consistently healing. You win through pressuring them until they break.
It's gone as far as to where in some matchups with Freeze Mage, you keep Rag in your opening hand because that's your win condition. Sometimes Reno Lock. If we go back about a month or so, N'Zoth Paladin was another one. You could keep both Rags in your hand because those were either one, because those were ways that you could just win that matchup.
Sure. I love that Joster is, highly attuned with like the fact that he needs to keep coin, needs to coin out that Ragnaros. Also, his hand was a little bit awkward, so it's not like he's going to do very much. Tossing a Doomsayer into the Doomsayer just to make sure he doesn't overdraw, because he needs to make sure he has space in his hand to keep Reno Jackson if he draws it.
Yeah.
So already Rosty picking up some damage. Normally this kind of hand, against most decks, you start thinking, oh man, I really hope that my Loot Hoarder hits more draw. But he's already got some decent pieces. Like 2 Ice Lances already starts meaning that Rosty might look to kill his opponent from above 20 health, if he can squeeze it in.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's one of the ways you win. If you aren't able to get a lot of pressure in early, then a lot of times you have to just be focused on cycling as much as possible and getting to that Alexstrasza. But since he did get that damage in now, it means that he might be able to have that opportunity where he can end the game in a single turn.
Exactly. So you see Rosty prioritizing hero powering his opponent's health instead of preparing for perhaps the potential trade. A lot of players would look, well, my Loot Hoarder's a 2-attack minion. He has 4 health. Over 2 turns, I can hero power that down. Instead, he says, if I pick up a single Frostbolt and I'm able to pick up Blood Mage Thanos, really important cards like that, I can do 21 damage just from the hand from that alone with Pyroblast's follow-up.
Yeah. Most of the time, Reno Warlock is going to be the ones doing the trading because they're going to give you all the time in the world. So there's not really too much of a benefit. Maybe some merit if you're setting up for AoE the next turn, but he's not. I mean, he really values that damage to the face because he understands what this matchup is about.
Oh, hold on. Joster actually has the 3-card combination. Leroy Jenkins, Faceless Manipulator, and Power Overwhelming with Ragnaros. So that's actually a lot of explosive potential. And Rosty's hand is looking a little slow. He doesn't have any card draw, which is ultimately what he was looking for, if not Emperor Thoris in itself. And that's going to mean Ragnaros is going to put a lot of pressure, and Rosty doesn't have clean removal for it. And that already means that Joster is potentially putting on the pressure that could accelerate him to a win in the future.
Yeah, very true. And Rosty does have some time, but like you mentioned, he needs to pick up card draw, and Ice Barrier not really going to do much.
So here's like the really unfortunate thing. Rosty needs to deal with Ragnaros, but he can't efficiently remove it. And if Joster gets a chance for Ragnaros to live, he's just going to faceless the Ragnaros and start putting 16 damage per turn. And then you're just boned from that point on.
Yeah.
You can't actually do much.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing you can do. You don't really need to combo this matchup because a lot of times when you use faceless Leroy Power Overwhelming, you pop the block at like 10.
Yeah.
Or you pop the block at a very high life total. And so facelessing Rag is usually the best use of it in this matchup in particular. In most matchups, but in this one in particular.
So setting up for the way for Blizzard to be able to clear it. Clear Ragnaros as well as whatever comes out if he faces manipulators it. Now you do have to weigh it. Joster is very much aware that Ice Barrier is now played. Do you go for that extra damage? You do have Leroy and Power Overwhelming.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe. Hold on. If you put him down to 7 if you don't attack as well. It's close. He chooses to life tap instead. He picks up an Withering Farce here, which means he can heal his Ragnaros outside of most burn ranges, like a Forgotten Torch, Frostbolt. Instead, Rosty has to deal with that through most likely an Ice Lance.
Yeah. Still wondering if that's better than just facelessing in this turn.
And getting the damage in.
And getting the damage in.
It's close, I think.
Because, yeah, you put him at 13, and your Rag is susceptible to Fireball here as well, so you sort of give up that opportunity. Maybe he is planning to use that with Leroy. You know, maybe just Faceless plus Leroy is enough to get through a lot of things. But now he sort of gives up that opportunity, especially when you know your opponent's setting up for Blizzard. Getting sort of that full health Rag can be really threatening. Not sure which one's the better choice there, but definitely forcing Rosty to use resources to kill that Rag more so than he would have used with just the Blizzard is definitely has merit.
Yeah, I'm somewhat inclined to agree because Faceless Manipulator somewhat represents damage anyways. If you copy Leroy Jenkins with Power Overwhelming, it's supposed to be 10 extra damage, and if you copy Ragnaros, it's dealing 8. But you get that damage a little faster. And now Rosty, he's picked up the second Frostbolt, meaning that he's got that damage next turn. So Joster needs to pick up Reno Jackson, or he just plays Drax to heal himself up.
Yeah.
Which means that you shut off your life tap, and you can't access to the potential miracle tap to get into that last draw.
Well, also it means that you bring your maximum total health up to 15. So that means even if you were to draw Reno Jackson in the future, it would mean that you're never going to get above 15, which means you're always going to be threatened. And so now it's Rosty has a few turns now since he has the ice block up to draw into that extra burn.
Well, does he? I mean, Power Overwhelming does allow you to pop it.
Yeah.
And it's actually a very clean pop too, because you can pop at 1. Not that it makes too much of a big difference, because you have Draxus with a 3 damage weapon, but every little inch counts. And Rosty is currently at only 11 damage. If he picks up another torch, or Roaring Torch, excuse me. Ooh. Oh, but Blizzard isn't it.
Yeah, he could try and freeze the board and also freeze the face and hope that he doesn't have any damage from hand. But of course, we see that Joster does have the Leroy Jenkins, so looks like Joster might be putting himself on the board.
Yeah, you know, the fact that he has so much pressure coming in just from Alex Straza, and the fact that he was able to heal for something was huge.
Yeah.
And that Ragnaros coming in and Rosty having to burn his Ice Lances. Remember he had to burn his second Ice Lance?
Yeah.
On the Ragnaros? That was massive. And Joster has finally managed a way to win the game of the series. But most importantly, take that Reno Warlock off the board, so that way he doesn't have to worry about it moving forward.
Yeah, now he's much less susceptible to just being cut out to the point where he won't find a win with that Reno Warlock. So still some tough matchups ahead. Still going to be tough for him to find wins against the Zoo Warlock that Rosty's bringing. But this is a start.
Joshua said he was happy just to be here, but you can tell that he's just he's happy just to be on the board there. Able to take game number 3. Joster was sent to military school for low grades, but came back into the Hearthstone scene to fight strong. And now he's here in the semifinals. Hear him talk about it a little bit more before we go into game number 4.
My sophomore, junior year of high school, that was the time where classes started getting a lot harder. I was top of my class beforehand, but then when I started taking advanced placement classes and harder honors classes, I didn't really rise to the challenge, and eventually my grades started dropping through those years, and my father thought it was a good idea to send me off to military school. No computer, no Wi-Fi or anything. I was there for a few months. I didn't have any way to play Hearthstone, but as soon as I came back, I jumped right back in the game and I started playing again. So I know that my lineup's not going to be the most favored in the field, but the way I'm going to win this tournament is by being the best player out here, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. And even though I don't have the most major tournament experience, I have a lot of Open Cup and ladder experience. So my skill set's really established, and I think I'm going to come out here and win this tournament.
Welcome back, everybody, to the America Spring Championship semifinal number 2. We're currently in the middle of a series, 2-1 in the lead for Rosty. Joster trying to turn it back, winning a game with Reno Warlock. Now we're going to go into game number 4. A really important win again for Joster. Being down 0-3 is just highly unlikely to come back in Hearthstone, but it's not impossible. And 2-1 is much more manageable, though, because now he can kind of take a breath, reset himself, try to go into this game. He does have a lot of unfavorable matchups, though, I think, looking at it on paper. Zoo Warlock, of course, from Rosty is one of the strongest decks against Joster's Hunter, against his Shaman, and also, of course, his Reno Warlock.
Yeah,
which was eliminated.
Joster did come in yesterday, and the same today, thinking that his lineup was unfavored against his opponent. And yesterday he managed to get a win. He squeezed it out 4-3. So he came in today again feeling the same way, feeling like Rosty had the upper hand as far as lineups go. But definitely this is one of those matchups where even though the Zoo is favored because of their ability to take early game board, the Shaman can pull out some wins against just about everything. So to tie up the series at this stage is crucial for Joster.
And it's going to be really tough unless he has that turns 1-3, very clean play to commandly seize the board. Joster keeping 0 cards, and I think Rosty was waiting to have some indication if he wants to do it or not. And I think Rosty kept his whole hand. Is that was the case, or did the Forbidden Ritual get swapped out?
I know he kept the 3/1 drops, but
right.
it looked like he threw away the Forbidden Ritual. He might have just gotten the Forbidden Ritual back in the same spot.
Ah, love it when that happens.
Yeah.
And joster doesn't have any turn 1, nor does he have a clean turn 2, and it's already looking pretty dicey for our Florida player.
This is one of those hands, especially with the coin, where you can ramp up very quickly. If joster misses sort of that 2-drop or even a 1-drop to combine with the rock biter weapon, that he could be in some trouble, especially with Darkshire Councilman plus lots of those cheap drops. You can get that thing rolling pretty quickly.
Yeah, tough times for Shaman High. He's gonna have to use rock biter and just clear this off. Passing once again, giving initiative to the Zoo Warlock, and Rosty can take that very easily through Darkshire Councilman, and he has Forbidden Ritual as well. Chooses instead to take it a little bit slow. He's recognizing that joster has a very awkward hand in general.
Yeah.
He's like, well, you threw away all your cards. I was kind of expecting Totem Golem or something on turn 2, but instead you just used rock biter. So I think he's just saying I can take this a little bit slow and really punish my opponent accordingly by setting up his minions first.
Yeah, it turns out it ends up being the correct call, considering that joster did have a lava burst, which even though it's not the most efficient way to deal with a Darkshire Councilman, it definitely is one of the best that he could possibly hope for, because leaving that on the board would make things really difficult. Now he can sort of hide this behind a Voidwalker, and he can also spread out his threats on the board, so if joster were to use lava burst, it'd be off curve, and he wouldn't be able to do anything else to the boards. Just a solid play from Rosty.
Yeah, it's a highly intelligent read, so that way his opponent can't keep up with him. Instead, he's stuck with some of these awkward plays. Joster choosing to go for the totem play, gets rewarded with a taunt totem. That one was really impactful. But Rosty has several ways to deal with this. First of all, Crazed Alchemist against totems. One of the best uses for it outside of Doomsayer.
Yeah, Crazed Alchemist is one of those tech cards that is actually quite flexible, especially in Zoo, because Zoo's all about the board, and in mirror matchups, a lot of times you can flip some of your minion stats to make favorable trades. And also, Darkshire Councilman being flipped when it's at low attack actually can be an absurd amount of burst damage that you can pull out of nowhere that your opponent doesn't necessarily expect. So in some situations, it can act as burst.
Joster gonna go fishing with Finley. See if you can find something useful. Those are some pretty good options. Life Tap and Steady Shot both really valid here, although he still needs to worry about the state of the board. Steady Shot's great, but Zoo Warlock might never have to Life Tap.
Yeah.
So he's gonna try to see if he can control state of the board. Rosty with Defender of Argus also is a pretty big card to play.
Yeah, draws into second Forbidden Ritual as well, which is it's a pretty good card against Shaman, especially when you're playing against a more aggressive Shaman that doesn't have those AoE spells tucked in, whether it be Elemental Destruction or the Lightning Storm. Just because it allows you to sort of spread out your threats. A lot of times Shaman will only play a couple things at a time. It can only kill a couple things at a time. Well, they can use their minions to trade up. They can't use their minions to sort of trade down into a lot of stuff.
A second Defender of Argus. A little bit luxurious here. Rosty can just continue to bolster his ranks 4, 7, 9 damage this turn with 8 in the hand for the follow-up turn. It's going to be really difficult for Joster to come back here. He doesn't have any form of the AoE here. Usually the way you kind of encourage Zoo to remove all these smaller minions is to play cards like Feral Spirits or Thing from Below, hope they trade a bunch, or even cards like Doomhammer, but you're going to be taking so much damage on the other end here. Also choosing to try to be a little bit defensive. How much damage is this? Got 8 plus 8, 16. A little bit short.
A little bit short. It's... Oh? Sergeant?
I mean, I think if this juggle lands correctly, it could just be the game. He also has multiple chances following up this turn, too, to end the game.
Yeah.
Okay. Sword 10.
These trades are just a little bit awkward, and I think that's what's going to stop it. 6, 7, 8, yeah.
So just a little bit short. He can put him down to 2, but I guess he can just hold on to the Soulfire.
Yeah.
No need to overextend. He's got 4 damage from the hand too, so even if Joster played like Doomhammer is like able to get past his taunt, like he's still gonna take a little bit of damage in the process. And Joster might even just concede at this point because you realize there's so much power on board that you're just dead onto it.
Yeah. Yep. He's gonna be not dead on the board, but any point of damage is gonna do it. And Soulfire is gonna make it. Rosty, another quick game. Leroy overkill picks it up off the top.
Very fast game once again, and Rosty cornering Joster, putting himself on match point. potentially getting a spot in the grand finals as he is up 3-1, only having to win with his Freeze Mage, which hasn't been exactly the most reliable deck today. If we go back to the previous series, watching Napoleon unfortunately defeated by the Winter once more.
Yeah, but, you know, Freeze Mage does have some good matchups in Joster's lineup, Rogue being one of them. So still a tough battle for Joster, but definitely doable as we move forward.
Rosty looking calm and composed, one game away from going to the grand finals. We had an opportunity to sit down and talk with him about how he streams and prepares for tournaments and the secret to all of his success thus far.
I usually stream when I want to practice for either tournaments or just want to get a little better at the game. So I'll stream myself playing ladder a lot. I'm usually going for #1 on stream. When I want to practice with certain decks or against certain classes, it doesn't really make sense to play against players who are only average at the deck or are just, you know, pretty good at the game. So what I like to do, I like to practice with players who are, you know, considered one of the better players of that specific deck. So for example, when I want to like play with Freeze Mage or like practice against Freeze Mage, I'll usually talk to Laughing or Amnesiac because they're generally considered some of the better Freeze Mage players out there. The reason I chose to actually get into Hearthstone is because compared to other companies, Blizzard just treats its players really, really well. They promote their players, unlike other companies. They don't look down upon it. When they were making Whispers of the Old Gods, they had streamers revealing cards. So that helps promote the streamers, but it also helps promote the game itself, which I really liked. I thought that was a great aspect. I also feel like there's a really good balance between the competitive scene and the casual scene. For their competitive scene, Blizzard actually just hosts open tournaments where anybody can enter, and they're worth HCT points. So if you're a casual player but you want to get into the competitive scene, you can just enter one of these and then start, and then eventually if you get enough of the points, you can enter the spring preliminaries. And then that would be a good start to becoming a competitive player.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed that little piece. Maybe jostling for some extra prize money if he just, like, you know, compliments Blizzard enough. No, it's true. Actually, during the interviews, and TJ, I think you told me this, like, they asked him a bunch of questions, and they said, do you want to say anything else? And then Rosty added that entire bit.
All by himself.
Yeah, it's true.
He wanted to say all those things.
Yeah. So, you know, Rosty feeling very passionate about Hearthstone, and specifically about the HCT. I think he actually went on in his interview to talk a lot about why he thinks Open Cups are just so good this year, and how, like, the system being open is really beautiful for Hearthstone in general. Of course, we couldn't fit all that within, like, a small little time segment, but Rosty's extremely passionate about the fact that he got this chance because the system is so open.
Yeah. And now he's doing a lot with that opportunity. So he's right now 1 game away from securing his spot in the grand finals, where Sidonia is waiting. But he's got to do it with Freeze Mage. And Freeze Mage versus an aggro shaman can be a tough matchup. With lots of spells from Ham, Doomhammer being a card that gives you lots of consistent damage, it can be tough to survive.
Where's Joster's Totem Golems, man? It's they're MIA right now. He needs to find his Totem Golems and have a sit down with them because they need to be here on turn 2. They're late to the party.
Yeah, I think we got an appearance of one at the very... There he is.
There you go.
He heard you, Dan. He heard you loud and clear.
Better late than never, because his hand was again looking like he'd just be playing small minions and totems for a long time. So Totem Golem, one of the better cards, pretty durable. And at turn 4, your opponent can't really efficiently remove it very easily. Has to fireball that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times it's if you can get it out before turn 4, it means you dodge pretty much every single type of removal.
Yep.
He saw Frostbolt already, so Frostbolt ping. Forgot Torch Ping is a turn away, so he's going to be able to get some damage in there.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Do Doomsayer and ping the 2-1 here in this position, or even perhaps Mirror Image.
Yeah, because that way your opponent has to use multiple resources. I think Mirror Image is better saved as sort of a situational card where you need to survive one more turn, and you know that your opponent's going to kill you next turn with like Doomhammer because it absorbs the hits. But maybe if you absolutely want the Doomsayer to go off, then Mirror Images are better. But if you're okay with him using resources to trade into it, actually he's just not going to use the Doomsayer at all. Maybe saving it for a freeze effect.
I mean, he does have the Blizzard in hand. He does have Mirror Image. I think also he's wondering, like, where can he squeeze in Loot Hoarder to draw because his hand's not looking amazing.
Yeah.
Joster, unfortunately overloaded, would love to be able to push out the Doomhammer this turn, specifically to not only put the pressure on, but to remove the Loot Hoarder very efficiently as well. Lightning Bolt. That'll allow him to have 5 mana next turn.
Yep.
And now he's going to put on some pressure with the Flame Tongue totems.
But it's still not looking too bad for Rosty. He got that cycle early on. He's going to have freeze effects, and he's got burn as well to follow it up later on. It's maybe a little bit lacking now, but now hiding this Doomsayer behind these Mirror Images is going to almost guarantee that this is going to go off.
Sure. I think it also gave him a backup option of, like, you know, maybe I draw Frost Nova, or, you know, just being able to get deeper into your deck while sacrificing just a little bit of health, as long as it's not too much given away.
Yeah.
Can Joster somehow preserve his board and kill that Doomsayer?
It
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Just because the Mirror Images block too much damage from the Totem Golem. Without, I mean, he could also coin a Doomhammer, do 5 damage to the phase with the Totem Golem. That might probably just be the alternative.
Yep, and I think that's definitely a viable play. He does have a Rock Biter next turn, plus Lava Burst, so he's already got 15 damage just next turn in his hand. So that means he only has to piece together 5 more before his opponent draws into one of these secrets. Ice Barrier and Ice Block, and there's both of them.
Wow. And the Alex Strauss. So if he gets too low, he can heal himself. Or in the better case for Rosty, he has the ability to play Alex Strauss, maybe even aggressively if his Ice Block is not popping, he has the follow-up damage.
Sure, yeah. He has more than 15 damage in his hand alone right now. And those aren't, yeah, he's building the board, but those aren't that impactful draws for Rosty. Argent Squire doesn't really do too much in this matchup.
Yeah, I think if Rosty picks up Emperor Thorsan, that could just be the mark of where Freeze Mage gets a small little opening to flip it and be the one that's aggressive, as opposed to the Shaman, which is, you know, doom hammering the Freeze Mage, and that's usually the position that you're losing in.
So Acolyte of Pain picked up a little bit more cycle. Not too much on the board at the moment. Rosty is worried about what happens if he doesn't really interact with the board this turn. But he's seen a Flame Tongue Totem already. And really, at this point, he just needs to buy time until he gets to turn 9. Like, that's the name of the game. He has an Ice Block up, so maybe thinking about playing Acolyte and pinging one of his opponent's minions instead of the Acolyte itself.
Yeah, it's tricky. You just saw 1 Rock Biter, so you know that, you know, at most he can do 10 damage with Doomhammer swings. I still think that you really want to draw into Wing Condition, but Rosty chooses to preserve his health, and 1 health does make a difference, especially in a matchup like this. The difference between having an Ice Block popped and not is actually the game most oftentimes. So Rosty prioritizing his own health counts.
Yeah, and he is rewarded because the Flame Tongue Totem is played, so that would have been an extra 3 damage this turn as opposed to just the extra 1. So he doesn't get that card, but I guess maybe thinking that he has all the cards he needs to win in his hand already if he blocks as much damage as possible. Now it's getting a little bit more dangerous.
I mean, he even accommodated for it. Just look at the fact that he gets to draw with his Acolyte anyways, and now if his opponent had that Rock Biter number 2, he'd be at 1.
Yeah.
So it's very, very razor-thin play, but Rosty is keeping good tabs on his opponent so far. Joster's still looking for a way to pop, and he can if he picks up a single damage from the hand.
Yeah, and if he doesn't pop the block here, then that means Rosty effectively just wins because Alexstrasza plus followed by the burn would be enough. But he does have enough.
Yeah, it's so tricky because, you know, if you play Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt, that's actually, you have to play everything. You can't just keep one thing from the hand.
Yeah, he could pop the block at one, but he'd have
Right.
to use everything, like you said, even both charges of the Doom Hammer.
Yeah, every weapon charge and every single point of burn, but it's almost a thing that you can't pass up on. It's clear that Rosty doesn't have like very good ways to swing the board right now. He had to play Blizzard instead of like being able to clear it completely.
Yeah.
And so you have to just go for the chance that you draw that extra damage. But Rosty has the Alexstrasza,
Indeed, he does.
so he can draw first to see what he gets with Acolyte. I don't know if a draw will truly change the play. Oh, he's
Yeah,
gonna
I
choose
think
to kill
he
instead.
taking out the Flamestone Totem blocks as much damage as possible. Just leave 2 on the board instead of leaving 3 on the board by isolating 1 minion with the Flamestone Totem. And also, if he draws like Argent Horse Rider, it means that that's even extra damage.
Sure,
Is
makes
going to be able to.
sense.
That's actually a really good pickup for Joster because a lot of pickups here, whether it be Life Tap or Steady Shot, give him that longevity. Life Tap.
Yeah, Life Tap's good, but Alexstrasza's on the board. I don't think he has much of a choice, though.
Yeah.
Okay, Lava Burst. So he'll have 8 damage on the following turn if his board survives. That's still very close.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to be enough.
Yeah.
Rosty has Blizzard. He's got even more cycle and just enough burn to close out the game. And
Yeah, I mean,
2
Blizzard's
turns, 3
enough
turns.
right here to start swinging in his favor because now he can start getting Alexstrasza damage every single turn, and it's as if he play like his own Ragnaros in a way. He's just
Yeah.
putting his opponent on a very short clock here. I mean, he's got damage. He's got lethal next turn, so Joster essentially has to kill him this turn or find a way to survive, but he can't. He picks up 2 minions instead with Flame Juggler and the Argent Squire, and that's going to wrap up the game and the series. Another 4-1 in the books. Rosty, the Snowman, is going to the finals, TJ.
yes, he is. Cold as ice. And that's impressive performance. I mean, a lot of players were saying that he had the best lineup overall coming into the tournament. He was super confident in his abilities throughout the entire week. And now he's moving on to the grand finals to face off against Sidonia. Dan, the stage is set.
I do want to say that although I picked Napoleon officially in the pre-show, I convinced Kibler many times over that I think Rosty is definitely a threat to take it all. He is standing by right now for a few words on his victory.
All right, thank you guys. Rosty, congratulations. You are going to the grand finals. You're going to be playing against Sidonia. Is this somebody you've possibly been preparing to play against?
Yeah, I was actually, for our top 8 matches, me and Sidonia tested together, and then I tested a bit with Firebat yesterday. I didn't play against his lineup as much as I wanted to, but it's a really common lineup, so I think I'm ready.
Right, so when you first began this journey back at the America Spring Preliminary, did you ever think you would make it to this point, make it to the grand finals of the America Spring Championship?
No, I thought I'd win.
You just, right from the beginning, you knew you were just going to, day one, just win all the way through the upper bracket and just win the whole thing?
If you come in with the losing attitude, you'll probably end up losing, so, yeah.
Definitely wise words to live by. So I have to ask, I think I already know the answer, but do you think you are going to beat Sidonia and become the America Spring Champion?
I have the best 5 decks in the room, so yeah. I think I will beat Sidonia because I have the best 5 decks in the room.
Well, that's very reasonable and a great way to look at it. Obviously, you have that winning mentality. But guys, it's going to do it for us. We're going to go ahead and toss it over to TJ and gang over at the analyst desk.
Thanks very much, Rob. That's right. I'm TJ. This is my gang. And the grand finals is set, guys. It's going to be Sidonia versus Rosty. 2 predictions on the board. I think a lot of players, both after talking with some pro players, after talking with a lot of the casters earlier on, these are the 2 players that before the tournament even started, before we even saw a single play from these guys, that these 2 had the best lineups. Cora, you surprised at all? What do you think of this grand finals lineup?
I am not surprised by Rosty being in this grand finals. I think he has played really, really well. I'm really admiring his confidence. I think that certainly having that mentality coming in definitely has something to do with his success so far. And Sidonia, I think, is a great player as well. But I think we were all maybe just a little bit surprised that the match with him versus Napoleon was certainly very close. It could have gone either way, but in the end, Sidonia managed to edge it out. And yeah, I'm really excited to see this finals.
Yeah, well, controlling nerves is something that you have to do to be at the top level. Raven, Sidonia, and Rosty coming into the grand finals. What have you thought of their play so far overall as across the weekend?
Yeah, I think that's what's really stuck out about these two players. Their play overall has been really solid. Probably like Rosty more than anyone else here, I think, has just been super consistent. But yeah, I think both players are going to be really strong here. I think Sidonia might have a slight edge. We saw him actually, do pretty well versus Freeze Mage in the lineup. And when I asked him about it in the interview, he was like, yeah, I think my lineup's pretty good versus Freeze Mage, so I'm good. So
yeah. Should be a good one. We're going to break it down a little bit and see this guy's road to get to the grand finals. We're going to start off with Sidonia. Sidonia coming in, of course, had a really good run through the preliminary, making it all the way through the upper bracket. And, throughout the weekend so far, he's just been showing just really solid and consistent play. Nothing really stands out. He's taking his time. He's thinking through his plays, and he's making solid decisions. Cora, what have been some highlights for you for Sidonia's play that we've seen across the 2 matches that he's played this weekend?
Well, there was that matchup where he played, actually we're seeing it on the screen right now, Zoo versus Freeze Mage. And it is not a great matchup for the Zoo. The Freeze Mage has a much better percentage chance of winning, but Rosty was able to stick to the Zoo's game plan of sorts, really flood the board, go for all that maximum damage, picked up a Mortal Coil and a Leper Gnome off of Dark Peddlers, which actually ended up winning him the game.
Yeah.
I think Rob and I actually discussed picking up Mortal Coil over Abusive Sergeant, which in the end actually ended up really working out for him. So even in some not so favored matchups, he played really well. He kept his calm, and it worked out really well for him.
And now, Raven, looking at sort of their lineups overall, pretty similar across the board, but the aggressive Shaman for Rosty and the aggressive Hunter for Rosty, mid-range Hunter for Sidonia, and then, of course, the Freeze Mage difference. Do you think Sidonia has a favored lineup against this, since Rosty right now has gone up against mostly control decks? Do you think Sidonia's more well-rounded decks will have an edge going up against Rosty?
Yeah, I think he might actually. All these decks do perform fairly well versus Freeze Mage. He's pretty happy with it. I think for the aggressive Hunter as well, he might need to get like a quick win against a deck like the Cthulhu Druid, and we've seen what happens that if you don't finish that game quick, all the taunt walls come up and the game can just end pretty swiftly after that. So I think he's going to be feeling pretty good about this match.
Yeah, I think consistency is a really big point to talk about with Sidonia's deck. Cora, looking at his decks, though, we talked about consistency, but are there any weak points? Are there any decks that Rosty might be able to exploit that are in Sidonia's lineup? Maybe the Cthulhu Druid, since that's a deck that we don't see everybody bring. Is that a deck that might struggle to find wins against more aggressive lineups?
Against Rosty's lineup, I'm going to have to say no, specifically because, like we'd mentioned, Rosty has that Freeze Mage, and Sidonia's Cthulhu Druid performed very, very well against Napoleon's Freeze Mage, his mid-range Hunter as well. So you actually said that Sidonia had said that his lineup is favored, Raven, and I have to agree. I think Sidonia, just specifically based off of archetypes, has a bit of an edge here, but on playstyle, I'm going to have to go with Rosty.
If there is going to be a weak link, Raven, if there is going to be a deck that's not going to perform well for Sidonia, what deck do you think it would be?
I think overall it's probably could be the Cthulhu deck, because the second you miss, stacking onto 10 damage Cthulhu, and then suddenly your Twin Imps don't activate and all the other creatures, it's going to be really difficult, and you can just whiff a couple of turns and the game can end very swiftly against some of the more aggressive decks. But if he can curve out pretty well, then he's going to look pretty good.
Yeah, you look across the rest of his lineup, you see aggressive Shaman, Zoo Warlock, mid-range Hunter, which are decks that almost everybody brought to the tournament. So it's really hard to point out what's a weakness in that lineup. But let's go ahead and take a look at his opponent. Let's take a look at Rosty's lineup. Rosty coming in. There was a few people, Dan was the first one, comparing him to Firebat and his work ethic and his attitude towards the game. Of course, we all know how Firebat, how his I
think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, he's got to be pretty happy.
Exactly, and he had another really consistent performance to the preliminary, going all the way through the winner bracket and taking out a pretty good lineup of players. LBYS, Neobility, BB Gun, Yoet's Flow, and Dwayne are all staples in sort of that open tournament scene, and even in the pro scene for some of these players in the Americas. So, Cora, I'm going to come to you first. Rosty. Does he have what it takes to take a championship? Is the Freeze Mage going to be a weak link? Is he going to make it all the way and become the America Spring Champion?
If there is a wink link in his lineup, it's going to be the Freeze Mage, specifically because of the decks that Sidonia has in his lineup. But from the play that we've seen from Rosty, he's been very consistent, very focused. Literally nothing seems to shake this guy. Even a loss, he just stays calm, stays stone-faced. I think ice cold, you said on the desk. So I have confidence in the fact that I think he's very confident in his play. and I really like that Dragon Warrior. I think the Dragon Warrior is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, it's a fun deck. It's a little bit different than what we're normally seeing with Temple Warrior. I think most notably has better matchups against like Hunter decks and especially Rogue decks as well. So if he was expecting a lot of those, good choice. But Raven, Rossi's very, very confident. He's a very confident guy. Does that play into sort of mindset at all? Do you think overconfidence is a thing? Do you think he might be going in thinking some matchups are more favored than they might actually be? Is this going to be a downfall for him potentially?
No, I don't know. I think from the one thing we've all seen from his very just slow, steady, meticulous play, and I think that's just the way he approaches the game, and he'll understand what his bad matchups are. But I think the trick will be, as you mentioned with the Freeze Mage, you know, he might have some rough matchups, but he looks like he can play that deck pretty well. So, you know, as long as he plays it as perfectly, then he should be able to get a win with it.
Yeah, I suppose you did say in his interview, if you come with a losing mindset, you're probably going to lose. So maybe the confidence will work out for him. We'll have to see. But to get some more thoughts on the grand final and the matchup that we're going to see, we're going to send it over to Dan, who's standing by with Dear Jason.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm standing with Dear Jason as we get ready for the finals to see who's going to take the America's Championship. I want to talk a little bit about your thoughts. First of all, between these two players, Sidonia and Rosty, who do you think is favored here in the finals?
As I look at both of these players' lineups, I see a clear weakness in both of them. Sidonia's Hunter and Rossi's Freeze Mage. Sidonia's Hunter has always been his last deck for the past 2 matches he has played, and so is Rosty's Freeze Mage. I believe the person who will get a win with their weakness first will win the entire match. And since Sidonia's Hunter, as we saw previously in Napoleon's match, beat Napoleon's Freeze Mage, I believe Sidonia is favored if he can get the Hunter versus Freeze Mage match early.
Wow, keep talking like that and you're going to be taking my job pretty soon. Specifically, let's look at some of the other small nuances too. How about the Cthulhu Druid and Dragon Warrior? People have been looking at some of these decks that have been performing pretty well. Just because everyone looks at Shaman and Zoo Warlock and they think those are the most powerful classes, but we also see some really other good classes perform. So what's your opinion on some of these other decks? I don't think it's a coincidence, for example, that the 2 finalists both have Dragon Warrior.
I think Cthulhu Druid and Dragon Warrior are really hard to corner and get like 3-0'd. I think they will sneak a win no matter what, and therefore you can't really count those as weaknesses. They can just get a win with whatever matchup they face.
All right, well, really concise and clear answers. Very well spoken, Jason, for such a young age at 16. Jason, you've been to 2 championships by now, and it's across different formats, different years, different metagames as well. What's the secret to just the consistency of being able to make it back? If people are watching at home and they want to follow in your footsteps to make it to a championship, what advice would you give them?
I do a ton of online tournaments, and these help me like focus on the format and available today. So I played a lot of Last Hero Standing formats back in 2014, and currently I play on a ton of Conquests to get familiar with their corresponding formats.
So that means next season we can try to see you come back for the summer season, right?
Hopefully.
All right, well, there you go. Dear Jason, back here for the Spring Championship. Did fall, but maybe we can see him back in the summer. And he's picking Sidonia for the Grand Finals. Let's head it back over to Sidebar and see what they need to do preparing for the Grand Finals in just a few moments here.
All right, well, we have predictions from a lot of people now. We have some from the casters. We saw some from Dear Jason early on. And talking to some players earlier, they have some a lot of opinions, too. It seems to be split even ways. We talked about the weaknesses of these decks, but we're going to talk about some positives now, some decks that might stand out as we are getting very close to jumping into the grand final match. We were just giving Rosty a chance since he just played a match to rest a little bit. But Cora, what's going to be the deck for, I'll give you Rosty, what's going to be the deck for Rosty that really is going to have a standout performance for him to win?
Well, we've been talking about that Dragon Warrior, and we've been saying that that's most likely going to have a reasonably easy time of getting a win. But like Jason said, like I'd said before, the deck that is most likely to have trouble will be that Freeze Mage. So if Rosty can really stay on top of his game, can really play at the peak of his ability and get a win with that Freeze Mage early, like Jason said, the player that gets a win with their weakest deck fastest is most likely to win the matchup. So definitely if we can see some peak Freeze Mage play, I think Rosty's going to be able to take it.
All right, I'm going to give you Sidonia Raven. If there's a deck to watch out for, the MVP deck, so to speak, that Sidonia's going to have perform well for him. What's it going to be?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Cthulhu Druid. I think the deck's performed well for everyone who's taken it so far. And it's just a really strong deck at the moment. I don't think people are realizing how powerful it is. We see maybe just not a lot of Druid overall, or people leaning towards the Yogg variant. But overall, I think there's going to be a really good matchup with whatever deck he plays against Rosty versus the Cthulhu Druid.
All right, well, it's about that time. It's about time to lay down the predictions. Now, we have 2 grand finals now, so it's only down to 2. So, Cora, start with you. Who's taking it all? Who's becoming the America's Spring Champion? Is it going to be Rosty or is it going to be Sidonia?
Well, I don't have a particularly good track record with predictions, but I said Rosty yesterday. I'm going to say Rosty today again. I just think, even with the weakness of the Freeze Mage, he has experience with other card games. He has experience with competition, and we've seen him be so calm, so collected, and play really very well over the last couple of days. So I feel like he can do that again, and I'm going to have to say that he's going to take it all.
All right, Raven, it's up to you. Is it going to be Rossi's from the Hollywood, local in the U.S., or is it going to be Sidonia from Canada?
I think it's going to be Sidonia, actually. I think the Freeze Mage might just be a weakness. But as we said, and as we mentioned, as Jason said, I think the first person to get a win with them or the weak link in the whole lineup is going to be really ahead.
All right, well, you heard the predictions, and you heard some thoughts from the players and from all of us. But it's about that time to jump into the grand final. So what we're going to do is we're going to send it over to Frodan to introduce our players.
Hundreds of players